Um, One of the things that I really have held my tongue about over the years. Ooh, this background's weird. That I've held my tongue about over the years is doing a critique of somebody else's work. YouTube has been around now. Well, I joined 14 years ago, and I think it started up maybe about 3 years before that. So it's been around a good 17 years. And in the last 5 years or so, there's been a lot of YouTubers popping up. Um, and it's very easy to go on someone else's video and critique their work because there's so many people doing so many different things in this business, specifically tile, but bathroom renovation, building showers, all that stuff. Even with some of the prominent YouTubers that are currently here, with Isaac and Sal and a couple of other Landberg and Sergeant Donovan, and there's a whole slurry. There's a whole bunch of YouTubers out there doing this type of work. And I hold back critiquing somebody else's work because at the end of the day, the customer is the boss, not somebody's comment section or somebody's opinion about what they're doing. So we all have to adhere to our standard no matter how we make things happen. The issue that I have, YouTube is a bit of a rabbit hole. And off to the right of YouTube, I got a recommendation the other day about this guy that did the shower pan. And I think it was done 3 months ago, and it's got like 300,000 or 400,000 views. And I'm like, how does this guy get a quarter million views in just, 3 months? How is that possible? So I went to his channel, and he has 1.8 million subscribers. I'm like, my head blew up. Almost 2 million subscribers, and he does a lot of different things, but it seems like most of the things that he does, he hasn't done before. If you go to his channel, and you'll figure out who it is as I go through the video, but if you go to his channel, he is doing a lot of different things. I don't know what his specialty is. I don't know what he's really good at, except for making videos where he makes a lot of mistakes. Almost all of his videos that I've seen, I didn't watch them all, but almost all of his videos, he goes through the process as an amateur, like a DIYer, makes mistakes, rectifies the mistakes, and then moves on. And I'm like, no, because some of even the mistakes that I notice that he doesn't rectify, he doesn't call himself out on because he doesn't know. Because he doesn't do bathroom renovation and tile and stuff like that every day in and day out. So if he was really good or halfway decent at what he did, I wouldn't be on here critiquing him. But because he has so many subscribers and because a lot of people are going to follow him, watch his videos before they would ever watch mine or Sal's or Isaac or anybody, they're going to watch his first. I think it's a disservice to show some of these things. Even the mistakes that are rectified shouldn't have been made because he, like everybody else, has an open door to YouTube University. So he could have figured out all of this stuff first before he made the video. And even the mistakes that he did make, which I'm going to go over, that he didn't rectify, right? People are following that. So I just felt like it was my place, because it's my channel, it's my videos, to do a critique of him. Um, Combined from the very beginning, I think there's five different videos that he did, and I put them together. I mushed them all together. It's an hour long, and I don't even think he got to the final stage yet. But this hour-long video, I'm going to do in snippets of like 15, 18, 20 minutes, because it's way too long to put on one video. Plus, I'm going to be talking and pausing the video and all that stuff. And so the actual clip is about 14 minutes long, but it's going to be 20, 25 minutes long by the time I yap my jaws and all that stuff. So anyway, I'm going to move on with showing with showing his video, with showing part of his video because it kind of it bugs me a little bit. It bugs me that he's not just that he's doing the mistakes, but he's got almost 2 million subscribers. And I'm like, I would die for half of that, just half of that. And I don't get paid off of YouTube, but I know he's making a lot. And once I find out how much he makes on average, I'm going to post that also, or I'm going to talk about how much he makes because it's important. Because at the end, well, I'll wait till the end before I tell you that because he talks about making sure you like and subscribe because it's going to motivate me to make more videos. No, your money is your motivation. Your money. You're getting a boatload from YouTube and you're getting sponsored. He gets sponsored. So he's making a good coin doing these videos, and I just feel it's disingenuous to put out false information out there. So yeah, without further ado.
Hey everybody, my name is Mike Montgomery, and today I'm going to show you every step for building a mortar shower bed, from installing the drain all the way to being ready for tile. So let's get started on Modern Builds. Welcome everybody to the bathroom renovation. This is the shower where I used to have a toilet tucked into this corner. We've already taken that out, and I'm going to be upgrading this bathroom from a half bath to a 3/4 by adding a shower.
Okay, couple of things I want to start off with. First of all, this particular series of videos isn't too bad, but if you go to his other videos, he's like yelling. Like there's no reason to yell on a video. There really isn't. He's over animating. He's animated. And I know he's not like that in real life. So I know it's a thing on YouTube to act and be somebody you're not and all that stuff, but I know he doesn't talk that way when he goes to Walmart or when he goes to the gas station. He's not talking to people like that. So why is he talking to me like that when I'm watching the video? I don't want to hear him yelling and being animated and all that stuff. That's just my personal take. But the other thing that I think is important, he's taking a toilet closet and building a shower. You're going to see the shower is extremely small. Would I do it? Yes, if my customer, paid me to do it, but this is a flip house. And so he's making an extremely small shower that would barely fit one person out of a toilet closet. So there's that.
To begin with, we had some really damaged subfloor where the toilet used to be, but before I could tear that out, I needed to get the drywall out so I had access to the edges of the plywood. We're also going to need to replace this with fiber cement board before we tile anyways, so this is a necessary step. I split the subfloor plywood in half with my circular saw, that way I could use a pry bar to get it loose. I was working around the 2-inch PVC that I had a plumber install for the drain, and it was a really tight fit. There was basically no clearance around it, so getting this second piece of the subfloor up was difficult, but it wasn't too tough. We got it! Oh man, that was a lot tougher than I expected. And we'll be putting down a new piece of tar paper between the decking and the new plywood. I'm going to need to make some space for this drain, and I've got a floor joist right here, so I'm hoping we're going to be able to shift over a little. At first, I just cut a really small opening to make sure that there was nothing in my way, and once I knew that I was safe, I cut about a 4-inch square to see if this pipe had wiggle room so that I could sit more square to the decking, because it was previously leaning. At Home Depot, I was able to get the same thickness plywood as the rest of the subfloor in the house. That's 15/32 of an inch if I remember correctly. I found what the center point of my drain was, and from there, I marked, measured, and then cut out a 4-inch hole for the drain to recess into. I cut this out with my jigsaw after making an access hole with a 1/2-inch spade bit.
Okay, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever to make a square. It's very easy to take a Sawzall and you cut a circular, right? With not that it matters at the end of the day, but that bottom flange that you're going to attach to usually has 4 screw holes that will anchor that drain, the bottom flange. You're going to see it later on. So to cut out a square that's bigger than that circular hole just doesn't make any sense.
This was also the perfect time to cut a new piece of roofing felt or tar paper, and this goes in between the decking and the subfloor, as well as between the subfloor and our first layer of mortar. I'm cutting both of these pieces now because the plywood subfloor is the perfect template for the outline and the center point for the drain. Back in the bathroom, I marked and cut my PVC pipe to the correct height so that that drain sat about a 1/2 of an inch above my subfloor. After I made the cut, I cleaned it up and chamfered it with a little bit of sandpaper, and then I did a dry test fit to make sure my measurements were accurate. That should be perfect. So now we're really making progress, and this is going to start assembling quickly. After I put my tar paper down, I could throw down my plywood subfloor piece and screw it down to the joists under the floor decking.
Okay, there was absolutely no reason to put that tar paper down before the plywood. Just a little side note. It's not doing any good.
This should have about an 1/8 inch gap between the wall. And now it's time to connect our drain. First, I'll apply primer to the drain. And once this is on, you'll want to let it set for about 30 seconds so you get a strong bond. And next, I can apply my cement. In this clip, I'm putting it on a little bit heavy, but I would rather do that than not have enough. You can always clean a little squeeze out.
Yep.
And you'll want to give it a little bit of a twist to help the cement grab, and it helps it slide on there more easily. If I screwed this directly to the subfloor, it would only sit about 1/4 of an inch above it, so I used these shims to get it to the correct height, and I double checked it was sitting as level as I could get it.
Okay, now here's the issue with that square. At the bottom of those flanges, there's a little bump out. There's 4 little bump outs that are about 3/4 of an inch. So if you cut a circular hole, now those bump outs are sitting flush onto your subfloor. Right now, he has to use shimming because he cut out too big of a square where those bump outs aren't gonna touch anything because it's a square. You see on the corner there, the corner facing you, like, there's just no room for those bump outs. Those bump outs need to be sitting on the subfloor proper, and then he wouldn't need these shims, these spacers, because the flange already comes with spacer. It's a little bump out.
Considering we got it 90% more straight than it was when we started, I'm happy with the result. And now we're all cleaned up, and we're going to move on to cutting.
Totally unnecessary. And so then I don't even know on the anchoring part, because I don't know, if he has a crawl space below that or whatever, but the anchoring part is now just held in with the screws. And it would be nice if he showed underneath, but he didn't, so I'm not going to speak on that.
The 2x10 blocking for between the two.
And 2x10 is definitely not needed. I use 2x6 all day long. The 2x6 plus your 1.5 inch of your plate, you've got 5.5, 6.5, 7. You have 7 inches tall, and that's all you need is 7 inches tall because your pan liner really shouldn't have to go up higher than that. But whatever.
2x4 studs. I used my 12-inch speed square with my circular saw to make sure I got square cuts. It also just helped make sure that I got them cut to the correct measurement because each piece was a different length.
Chop saw for that. I don't know why he's using a circular saw, but I would use a chop. Well, I do. I use a chop saw to cut up all my blocking.
And now these should just slide right in. And once this blocking is in, it basically acts as a backboard for our shower liner. That way it's 100% supported rather than just trying to be nailed onto the 2x4 studs or something like that. You won't be able to nail from every end, so toenail wear necessary. And check out this custom piece that I cut so I could fit around all these wires. It really wasn't too complicated. I just used my table saw to cut these grooves by raising the height of the blade to whatever amount I wanted to cut away. And then using my miter square, I cut these dado grooves. And this should hopefully give me the most amount of meat left on this wood, so this whole perimeter is as strong as it can be. Let's check the fit.
Yep. Exactly.
It's perfect.
Yep. Anytime you have pipes or wires or anything that, like are too forward of where your plate is at, then I always do exactly what he did so I can fit in a piece. And if it's still too thin, I can use a piece of plywood and I could use liquid nails on both the right and left stud to liquid nail a piece of plywood on. So that's a good little trick that he's showing.
We took a little off the top, but that nail actually is really sunk in there. All good. I got a pretty tight squeeze with everything, but that really isn't necessary.
Okay, here's the issue that I'm going to get to in a minute. You notice on that left side, you've got those 3 studs, right? On that left side. But I don't think on the right side there's any studding, vertical studding, in order to hold the glass once the glass goes up there. And I'm going to get to that a little bit later.
Just make sure you've sunk all of your nail heads in. And I really am happy with how all this 2x10 blocking went. Everything definitely feels more rigid. And our final step before our mortar bed is to build the front curb, which is crazy simple. I'm just gonna cut 3 2x4s to the same length that I'm ultimately gonna end up stacking together and attaching to the subfloor. This will all get waterproofed and you're...
Okay, so I'm gonna put on my glasses here because I don't want to misspeak and it's hard to see from my angle. On that right side where his curb is at, you noticed on the sheetrock on that right side, there's no vertical studding there. On that left side, there is, the side that we just saw previously, but on that right side, and I went through the video 2 or 3 times to see if there's any studding over there, and I'm just not seeing it. So it's very possible that's the shower door side, so he doesn't feel like it's necessary, but I always put in studding on that left and right side that match up to the curb. So that if in the future, even if he doesn't have something solid there, somebody else might, and you would want that. The other thing I'm going to talk about is when he nails in, I don't know if he nails or screws in this bottom plate as he goes up the 3 and he stacks up the 3. He barely even fastens it. Watch this.
You're gonna see how it happens, so make sure and stay tuned. I measured off the back
1, 2,
wall and
3.
double checked
That's it. 1, 2, 3 nails.
everything was square.
1, 2, 3 nails. 1, 2, 3 nails. Yo, nails are cheap. Why are you putting 3 nails? There should be 2 nails on that right side, a couple 4 or 5 inches over, 2 more nails, couple 4 or 5 inches over. There should be at least 10, 12 nails in that. Twin nails, like, I don't know.
Before I nailed down each layer.
So he put a few more nails there, but he didn't toenail it. So on that left and right side, that top stud is not anchored to the wall. It's anchored to the floor, but not to the wall. I bet I could go over there and grab that top 2x4 and move it in and out, and the whole thing would move because it's not anchored. He should have toenailed that left and right side.
And after a quick length adjustment, I double checked the fit of my second layer of tar paper, and once I knew it was a good fit, I used it as a template to cut my wire mesh. And I just used some tin snips for this.
Okay, so this is a whole nother bag of tricks here. He is going to make a water in, water out system. So he's going to do a pre-slope. So yes, arguably that, as he said, the second layer of tar paper is needed. The first one wasn't for sure, but the second one is needed because he's going to do a pre-slope, but he doesn't need the pre-slope, and you're going to see why.
The wire mesh is reinforcement for the first layer of this mortar called the pre-slope. And the tar paper is really a moisture barrier for while the mortar is curing. You don't want the water to wick away into the plywood too quickly, and that's why it's there.
True.
And now that everything's stapled down, we are ready for our pre-slope mortar bed pour. The math for figuring out your pre-slope is actually really simple. You just need a slope of 1/4 inch over every foot, plus whatever the height of your drain is. For me, 1/2 inch. Around these 3 sides of my perimeter, it averages out to about 1.5 feet from the drain to the wall. But I'm going to be referencing this far part that I mentioned. It's about 2 feet, a little bit less from that wall. So that means the 1/4 inch per slope foot needs to be multiplied by 2 for 1/2 inch, and then we'll add that 1/2 inch for the drain. So now I'll use a level to make sure that I've got a really flat line, 1 inch up all the way around the wall. I also see some people making a mark a little higher than they actually want to be. That way it's always visible. And I just say do what works best for you. After disassembling these parts of the drain that go on after the membrane, I used painter's tape to cover up the actual drain so I didn't get any mortar down there. I also put a piece of tar paper around this old vent pipe so the mortar doesn't interact with it at all. And now it's time to mix. I'll be using this MAPE or MyPay 4-to-1 mud bed mix, which says it's ideal for shower beds. With any product like this, I would highly recommend just following the directions on the bag. It's specially formulated, and they definitely know how much water to put to get the best results.
No,
You want it to be able to clump up by hand.
I know how much water is needed, not the directions, because I'm building the shower. So I may need it a little richer than somebody else would or whatever. I decide that, but okay. But watch this. So this is a very controversial thing to me. And I don't know who it started with. I think it started with Isaac, some years ago, that a dry pack should be used. No, 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 no. I get too many calls and emails from people saying they didn't add enough water to their dry pack and now it's crumbling and now there's dust on the top of their mortar bed, et cetera, et cetera. But I clumped it the way that everybody tells me it should be. I clumped it and it didn't fall apart. You could add any amount of water to mortar and it's going to clump. It's going to stay together. It's not going to fall apart. You could add more water, you could add less water, but it's still going to clump up like that. So it's kind of a misnomer also to say, oh, when you clump it together like a snowball, it shouldn't fall apart. It will always not fall apart because you clump it and you compress it with your hands. Watch this. Like this, and not lose its shape. But if it crumbles, then you know that it's still too dry. It's never going to crumble. Anyway, that's my own little weirdness. I don't know. I just, like I said, I get way too many calls from people trying to do dry pack that don't do it correctly. And it doesn't need to be done on a pre-slope anyway.
I started by adding mortar to the back of the shower and getting that first bit level to the line that we made with our permanent marker. Then backfilling towards the drain. And these screening boards are going to help making the slope really simple. On one side, I'll pivot from the drain because I want this mortar to be flush with it. And then on the other side, I'll use it to match the line that we've already made. It worked out pretty convenient that 1 inch was the top of this 2x4. So we're just going to bring this down a little bit to match that.
But okay.
And notice how this end is on the drain. This is how we screed away the excess. And now I'm going to switch to my shorter one so that I'm referencing closer to the edge instead of over here. And one more time, we'll go shorter. And hopefully you can see how much closer we've already gotten. On this first pass, we're just going for a B-, not an A+ yet. And now I'll start cleaning some of this up with the actual trowel. And in this step, you can really start seeing the shape get refined. And then I backfilled any negative spaces or voids before doing our second screeding. And now we are starting to look really, really good. I don't think I'm going to have enough to finish this out, unfortunately. It's going to be really close. I just mixed up about 1/4 of a bag by hand, and as I went, I constantly did that test where I balled it up to make sure it wasn't too dry or too wet. I followed the same steps on the front of this pre-slope, but I kind of stuck to the shorter screeding boards. Alright, that was a good guess. I don't think I had very much extra there. And now I should be able to smooth this out by hand and totally blend it. And this is where I would say we are going for that A+ or A-. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. We are doing another layer on top of this. So I really don't think that could have gone better, but we'll have to come back tomorrow morning to check to see how it cures. And to do our final second pour. I have awesome news. It's been a little less than 24 hours, but our mortar bed is cured and looks awesome. I'm going to scrape away a couple of these little loose pieces and get everything cleaned up, and I'll be ready to install my pan liner. I'm going to go ahead and unfold this outside so it can sit in the sun for about 15 minutes so it can flatten out and be a little easier to fold. And
very, very good tip. I do that all the time. I cut it open and I put it in the sun. In the winter time, the sun doesn't get enough heat, so I'll get a space heater. I space heater at home, and I'll bring it in with me, and I'll put it in a bathroom or a small room or whatever, and let the space heater run on it. Because trust me, that is a lot easier to manipulate when it's more pliable when it's warm.
While that's happening, I'm going to measure for the liner. The bottom here is basically 34 inches wide, and I want it to go up 6 inches around the wall on all 3 sides and over the curb.
Okay, so technically speaking, your pan liner should be 3 inches above your curb. And he's going a little bit beyond, well, a little bit below that, because if he's saying 6 inches and his curb is basically 4.5 to 5, right? So he needs another couple inches. It doesn't really matter. It's a small potato type of thing, but I thought I'd mention it. 3 inches above the curb is where your liner should go.
Used a straight edge, and I would err on the side of cutting this an inch or so larger than you need. You can always trim a little bit of excess once it's installed.
Yep.
I used a little bit of silicone in between this drain piece and the liner just to make sure that there's a seal that would never go bad.
Okay, so that's a little controversial too. Putting some caulking there around where the drain hole is at, because there might be a backup that might get into your shower pan at some time in your life. I don't remember the last time I ever saw a shower back up. I think it was probably at a YMCA, or maybe it was in high school, 40, 50 years ago or something like that. I just don't remember showers backing up. Is it better to do it than not to do it? Yeah, arguably, yeah, but it's not a huge step if you missed it.
And then plopped my liner in place and started lining it against the back wall. And you want to attach to every stud. You can also staple these. Kind of what that one ended up being. And next we'll do a close-up on a corner. And it's important that you just don't cut this corner. Instead, you want to fold it. So first, I'm going to make sure that it's actually got no slack and it's in the corner nicely. And then when I press into the corner, you can see it naturally folding on itself. Just like that, in a way that folds flat without me needing to cut it. I stuck a nail through all of those layers above where the cement board is eventually going to lay over the top of this liner. And the steps on the previous corner are really similar to what I did on this front curb. You can see how I make a custom cut after I make sure it's folded into the corner really well. And then with this extra cutoff piece, I used it as a backer piece that I'll glue on. But for now, we'll just nail that in place.
Okay, so that's a little bit overkill. That's a little bit over engineering the whole thing. That little corner area is going to be protected by your waterproofer, as is the curb. So having that little corner piece is I suppose kind of like having a seatbelt in your car just in case, but no water should ever get to that corner area anyway. So to me, it's a little bit overkill, but okay.
And before the silicone dries, we'll address the drain. I used a utility knife to cut through where all 4 of those bolts can poke through. After that, I cut the center drain hole.
And I never understand in the life of me why people continue to put a circle around that drain when they cut out the liner. I do a little X cut. So where the flaps of that liner will go down into the drain and make it harder for water to ever back up rather than cutting out a hole which makes it easier for water to back up and go in. Like it doesn't make any sense to me to cut that big old hole. Just doesn't.
And next, I'm going to use some of this PVC cement. I used this everywhere I've already got overlapping seams, but then I used these inside corner patches to make sure that everything is super waterproof.
Overkill. So these damn corners, as people like to call them. I mean, the fact that he used a little scabbing of that pan liner on there, okay, not a big deal. It doesn't take a lot of time. But to go buy these damn corners and put them in there, you're expecting that there's going to be a leak. You're expecting that there's going to be a failure. You're putting those there because you're anticipating water will get there. And yes, back in the day, before we had waterproofing, water would get there. Every tile guy knows out there that showers always fail ankle below. And the number one spot is those corners. The left and right of the curb almost fail 80% of the time on a shower before waterproofing. But now that we're waterproofing everything, those damn corners are irrelevant. They're not needed. Like you can put them there, but if you're putting them there, you're saying to yourself, water could get there. And when I build a shower, I'm saying to myself on the surface, water will never get there. So it's a different mindset, I guess.
I'll leave links to these and everything else I used down below in the description. And I totally botched this corner, but I'm going to do my best to make it look decent. Either way, I'll be certain it's waterproof. Even though it kind of looks tragic and there's no way I would leave this without a patch, once the patch was on, I was really confident that this is super waterproof. Before I secure this down, I'm going to make sure that the liner is all the way in the corner, like pressed in, and then I'll fold it over and then nail it here. That way I don't have fasteners on the top. There's never going to be standing water on the steps, so it's really not a big deal, but we are now ready for our mortar bed. Now I can install this part of my drain, and this is pretty similar to all drains. And I'm going to raise this to about 1.5 inches, the same as a 2x4. And this is what I'll use to mark my reference line around the perimeter, and I'll make sure it's sitting level before I mark it. Remember, we've already established the slope with the first coat called the pre-slope. And so now we just want to match it, maybe just make it a little more aggressive to be safe. And it's a good idea to double check that you are in fact sloped. And you can see the bubble there is by pretty much 1 inch. That's perfect. Before I add my mortar, I'm going to add this little bit of pea gravel around the shower drain.
Okay, here, this is another issue. You see those little tiny pebbles in the front of you? Like before you get up to the drain, there's a couple of little tiny pebbles, probably 4 or 5 of them, whatever. But he's got a whole handful. That pea gravel is going to clog a weep hole. Those weep holes are about 1/4 inch in diameter, about 1/4 inch. And those little rocks in front of you right there in front of the drain are about 1/4 inch. So I never, ever in my life would advocate for pea gravel to be around my drain. Even though I don't do pre-slope and don't believe in them and I don't believe that they function as intended, I would never, ever put pea gravel there. And there's other guys, tile guys, that have put rubber spacers, like those old-timey rubber spacers we used to use. Stupidest thing I've ever seen. Because a rock is dense enough, nothing's going to get through a rubber spacer. That would be the last thing. But the interesting thing about this, which I'll get to later, he's doing a water in, water out system on his pan, but he waterproofs the entirety of the shower otherwise. It makes no sense.
Allows any potential water to weep through back into the drain. And now we can add our mortar. Once again, we're looking for a relatively dry mix here. We're not looking for anything wet. It needs to hold its shape. I'll start again here towards...
We're not looking for anything wet. It needs to hold its shape. How do you gauge we don't need anything wet? In order for mortar, right, the binding material is a cement. And in order for the binder to actually work and function, it needs moisture. So this whole idea of a dry pack, get away from that.
The back, well, I've still got easy access. And this time, before I get too much material, I'm gonna go ahead and flatten out the back and get it to the right level. And if you don't trust your eye, or if this seems difficult, you could always use spacer boards around your perimeter. Right there's a pretty decent starting spot. And now I'll work this way. If you do that, after you screed everything, make sure you remove those boards. I think that's a pretty good starting point again. To me, this seems like a quicker, easier method, but you let me know down in the comments if you've done both. That all looks close to the line I drew, but now let's make sure it's level. That's almost perfect. The back is a tiny bit high. The right side's high here, I can tell. And then back there, we're very close. So this corner here is a bit high. Just try and make it to where we can see that line again. Wow, that's dead level. So is this one. Awesome. Perfect. All right, so now we can start filling it in. To me, that was way easier than using spacer boards, removing them, and then backfilling all of that mortar where the board was. Dripping sweat. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do another bag. This is where I made a sort of tragic mistake. I added a little bit too much water, and this was my last bag of mortar, so I couldn't add more mix. Almost done. Hydrate. It was a little bit too watery, but it wasn't anything catastrophic. Maybe I was being dramatic a second ago. All right, now we should actually be screeding here towards the drain. The more I worked the mortar, the more I got a little bit of water to rise to the surface, but I got most of that out of there. This is going really great. We're gonna go ahead and fill up the rest of this shower pan. We're gonna really make sure to pack it into the corner, just like we did earlier, and build it up to the permanent marker line. Just like before, we're trying to get this like 70% of the way sloped, and then we'll get it refined on the second pass. So that's our first pass done. I'm gonna double check that we're sitting level around all of our edges before we do a final screed. That's perfect. So now I'm just hoping that this side is good, which it's very close. The front needs to come down just a tad. So I just removed a little material with my trowel. Oh man, the front needs to come up a little bit now. So we'll put a little bit back in. We are now level. Yep, that's perfect. We just need to double check the front. And that's perfect. You can tell I've got a little too much water in my mix because it's standing on the top, but it's still holding its shape perfect, which is the most important thing. I didn't get the best footage during the second stage of the slope just because my body was in the way of the camera quite a bit. And once the water had settled towards the drain, I used a towel to wipe it all up before smoothing everything out for a final time.
Okay, so here's an interesting thing. Back in the day when I was starting out, 22 years ago, 20 years ago, 22 years ago, I would mix my mortar for my pan a little bit soupy also, like that. And it always held. It always was very rigid and very solid the next day. Adding a little bit more water like he did is not the end of the day, but soaking it up with a towel, all those weep holes he's talking about should have kicked in. And then also the excess water would go into the drain because the way I used to do it back in the day, I would, have maybe a little bit of water pooling around the drain. The next day it would be dissipated. So I wouldn't use the towel because that's going to screw up. You're chasing your tail because now he's going to screed out his mortar again and you're still going to have everything, all that moisture rise to the top, but whatever.
I won't lie, I'm bummed about adding too much water, but we'll check back tomorrow and see how it looks. Oh,
That is garbage. That is complete garbage. Not only can you tell too much water was used because see the discoloration of the mortar, but when he does a close-up, you're going to see all the ridges and humps and stuff like that. And here's the thing with tile, guys. All of our prep we have to follow with tile. Everything that we do is predicated on putting tile on at the end. And if any of your prep, whether it's your wallboard or your shower pan or your curb or anything is, wonky, then you're going to have wonky tile or you're going to be struggling. You're going to be cussing yourself for not doing the prep right. And his prep is not great. I don't like that the drain is offset. He claimed that there was a floor joist in there that precluded it being center, but one way or the other, I would have gotten that drain center. That's just a side note. That's just a quirky little thing of mine. I like symmetry.
Check that out. Even though it took a few extra hours.
That is not acceptable. That's that's a shoddy shower pan.
For the water to wick away from our mortar bed.
Look, it's uneven. It's not even screeded right or anything like that. Like, the best he could hope for, the best he could hope for is if there wasn't so much water, because I don't know, the content of his water, is that the best he could hope for is it doesn't crack later on. Because again, I don't know how much water he used, but however much he used, it was enough to where he couldn't screed the surface that well. And I would have done it over. Like right then and there, when he realized, when he just a few minutes ago, he said, "Yeah, I'm kind of bummed out. I used too much water." Take it out and start over. You know, mortar is cheap. It's like $4 a bag.
It looks great. Everything is
That's
sloping
okay.
towards the drain, but all of our perimeter edges are super level. That's going to make
That matters. Yes, all four of your perimeter should be level. That does matter. I agree.
tiling so much easier.
But oh my God, look where his right foot is at. Just all of that. That's just, I don't know. Even though it's going to be covered by tile and all that stuff, all those ridges and humps and all that stuff, not happy with that at all.
Really quick, I cleaned up the chrome part of our drain. I made sure it had the plastic cover on while we were doing our mortar bed pour. And now we are ready for tile. The comments in my last episode have informed me I made a terrible mistake doing the shower pan and the drain in my last episode.
So that's going to be coming up next because, as I said, it's an hour-long video, and I've already just 15 minutes of his video with my interaction and commentary caused this video to be over 30 minutes. So I'm going to go back to it. There's going to be a part 2, part 3, and a part 4, I'm sure. Maybe even a part 5, I'm not sure. And I'm not ragging on him. Trust me, I'm not. He's a good kid. He means well. But again, YouTube University has been around a long time, and there's a lot of tile guys that he could have gotten all of this better. He could have gotten this better. I have no idea how he has 1.8 million subscribers as hackerish type of work that he does. And this is just the beginning phase. There's other stuff I'm going to go through too, and it's not nitpicking. All this stuff matters. It's not nitpicking. Some of it is, but I also preface, I'm like, well, this is my own little thing, like the drain. The drain not being centered, yeah, it's nitpicking a little bit. But and then the overkill on the damn corners, yeah, that's nitpicking. But some of these things do matter. If this guy was my helper, I would have had some words with him. I would have had him practice more. Trust me, this is not the best work that I've seen from a so-called professional. Yes, he doesn't do this on a daily basis, but he's putting out this felonious information, this information that nobody should follow. Most of this stuff nobody should follow. I'm just saying. So anyway, I'm going to be back. There'll be, like I said, part 2, part 3, and part 4, possibly 5. I don't know. It depends. I talk a lot. Hey, if you enjoyed that video and you learned something, consider being a Patreon member. $5, $10, $15 a month would help me greatly produce more videos. I make nothing from YouTube at all. If you're going to call me for advice, please donate $50 for 30 minutes. My link to my PayPal and my Patreon account is down below. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you get immediate notifications as soon as I post videos. And thank you very much for your support.